Maiju Nurminen. Oh my gosh, I asked you how to pronounce your first name, but I forgot the second name. Maiju, good to have you. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. And I think we both need to give a big shout out to Yuka Nakasone, who
Yeah.
is the mastermind behind this meeting. This is the first time you and I have ever met, but she was very adamant that I need to talk to you because of her involvement with the Process Innovation Challenge. And I have had Rickert from Zilio, your nemesis. I've hosted your
Mm.
nemesis, your competition on this channel. So it's only fair that I provide you an audience as well. And I was a couple of weeks ago when I first started talking to Yuka about this, but I was interested in the concept that you were putting forth for the Process Innovation Challenge because
Mm.
it's something very close to what I've been talking about a lot recently, which is about customer experience and quality and language and localization and all of that stuff. So maybe we can start off by you just giving us a quick update on what it's all about.
Sure. So I was talking about something I call either impact localization or iterative localization. And that's an approach that we've been applying at What Three Words for, I want to say about 18 months now. And it started when we were thinking how to best localize our app store listing. So our product is a free app um, called What Three Words, and it was really kind of this method was inspired by how App Store listings and how that platform works and how the listings are actually constructed because they consist of different components. You have textual elements, you have visual elements, and that kind of prompted us to think that this is something that goes beyond translation and transcreation. This is an entire experience that consists of these different elements. And
So
these apps are
correct me if
yeah,
I'm wrong. And this
yeah.
is actually because we were talking about what three words is not what we're talking about today. Right? What we're talking about today is what three words your company had a challenge, had a
Mm,
problem statement, and developed a solution to fix that. So it's basically something that's
mm.
helping what three words in the global market. Am I correct in that assumption?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, that's the intro I totally
And,
should
and,
have
and I
should have
think it
given.
took me way too long to understand that because I was like, what three words?
Yeah.
Are we talking about what three words? Are we talking about? Because like what you guys are doing at what three words is super cool. And,
Mm,
but I know you're not the expert in that. Maybe we can talk, just give us a plug. What does your company do?
yeah,
And I can pull it up here too, so that we can see it on the screen.
sure, sure. There we go. So yeah, never get lost
And I
again,
have this
literally.
one
So what
too.
three words? Yeah, the map. Cool. So what three words is a way to talk about location in a very easy and precise way. So you might think that we've got addresses and surely we have ways to talk about location. But there are actually lots of places in the world that don't have street addresses at all, and such as in developing countries. Um, but also in developed countries, even in urban environments with proper street addressing, you have lots of places like parks or beaches or outdoors areas where it can be quite difficult to
Right.
describe where you are or
It's
where
like
you're going to be.
how do I get my Grubhub order when I'm at
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
music festival kind
Yeah.
of thing, right?
How do you order pizza to your picnic blanket, basically? So what we've done is that we've given every 3 meter square or every 10 foot square in the world a unique identifier of three random words. So, for example, field count soap is the front entrance of our London office. So it's accurate to 3 meters. So you can literally pinpoint specific entrances to buildings, or you literally have an address no matter where you are in the world, whether you are backpacking in Cambodia or at your summer house somewhere remote. Wherever you are, you have a way to very precisely describe your location.
Okay, I'm
And
going
there
to
are
be
lots of
showing
ways.
everybody like exactly where I am right now, which is kind of creepy, but I'm zooming into my front door here.
Yeah, and
Oh, oh,
that's
and it's
really
broken
helpful.
down by grids. I see.
Exactly, those are the 3 meter squares. So it's really helpful if you just want to use the app with your friends and set up and agree to have a meetup somewhere. You're going for a barbecue or picnic or whatever, where you won't have a street address for that. But equally, if you need to tell the emergency services where something has happened, or businesses use this as well, such as logistics companies, um, ride-hailing companies, um, like in the automotive industry, for example, Mercedes has integrated this what 3 words into their in-car navigation system so that their drivers can have a better experience. So there's a lot of really exciting use cases. And what 3 words, we've already launched it in 48 different languages. So even when you're traveling, you can still kind of find your way around in a language that you're comfortable in.
So
And
the 48 different languages. So the 3 word,
yeah,
every block is the unique identifier consists of 3 words. So to
yeah.
localize that, do you localize the words too?
Yeah, and the interesting things about
Interesting.
that, the interesting thing about it is that no 3 word address is a translation of each other. So in a sense, when we localize what 3 words, we actually like every product, every language version is an entirely independent product. We create a word list for each language from scratch that kind of meets the obviously the kind of technical criteria from our side, but really appreciate the uniqueness of each language and culture when we select those words that then our algorithm shuffles and uses to create these 3 word addresses.
So if I'm just realizing, I think this is my front door, and my 3 word code is Magic Winner Salsa, which, by the way, is an awesome 3 word code. So
Agreed.
if localized into Spanish, would that just be a one-for-one translation? So it would be like
No,
Mágico Ganador Salsa. Salsa is a Spanish
not
word.
at all.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not at all. And there are a few reasons for that. For I guess the most obvious one being that not every word translates into other languages at all, or it might not translate as a single word.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and part of the logic of what 3 words is also that we use those most common and shortest words in each language in the area where that language is most commonly spoken. So, for example, I'm Finnish. We've allocated, or our algorithm has allocated the shortest, most common Finnish words to Finland and other areas where Finns are most likely to be using what 3 words. Um, with and kind of when you apply this logic in all of these languages, then you kind of can't lock certain words to specific places
Makes sense.
um across them. So yeah.
Makes sense. So this, all right. So that's what 3 words is. So I feel better now. I understand.
Yes.
Hopefully, our listeners also understand as well what it is. Let's see who's here. We got some comments already. Maria Scheibengraf. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Oh, hi Maria. I know
She's,
her as well.
she says, Mayu has to be my favorite client side manager ever. Oh my gosh, that sounds like a vendor kissing butt right there. Nice work. Nice work, Maria.
Yeah, Maria is brilliant.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Really.
she's been on the show before. She has her
Ah,
her book that came out, the
yes.
Bible. The Bible. Did I get my copy? Oh, I owe you a screenshot, Maria, when I get my copy. But it's not here right now. All right, so moving on. This was all just laying the groundwork to understand
Mm,
what was the challenge in the App Store that you faced, and because this is where the innovation comes from. Innovation always comes from
yeah.
having a challenge to overcome. What was your challenge, and what
Yeah.
was the innovation that you put forth the PIC?
Yeah. The challenge is that, we're creating a global standard for talking about location, and that is a massive challenge. Um, so in the App Store specifically, we wanted to see what we can do to our conversion rates globally in different markets if we start kind of tweaking things and kind of deviating from the way we, for example, communicate about what 3 words here in the UK in English. So I think most commonly, app store listings are localized by just translating the description text that you have there, and then maybe localizing the keywords for better SEO. But actually, the listings consist of so much more, such as the visual elements, and you really it's like an amazing playground. Really, you can experiment with lots of different things, such as what you communicate uh, in these images, what kind of visual like design expression you use, and that sort of stuff.
And ask a
So,
silly question from someone who's
mm,
it's been a long time since I localized for the App Store. Like, is there customizability, localizability in the App Store to like have custom pictures, custom screenshots, custom?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tell,
Yeah.
tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about those. Like, what kind of customized? Like, you see on screen here, I pulled up what three words, and it's the desktop version of the App Store, but still,
Yeah.
nice 4.8. What's customizable in here and what's not? And out of what's customizable, like, what really needs to be customized, right? Like, because I'm sure there's diminishing
Yeah.
returns. Like, you don't need to make everything super customized. So, talk to me a little bit about this.
Yeah. So App Store optimization, or ASO, is kind of its own recognized thing with best practices that people have discovered, and which we very much try to follow as well. So you can
When you say
customize.
there's best practice, sorry, I just keep interrupting with questions.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
that's
When you say
fine.
there's best practices for App Store optimization,
Mm,
are there best practices for localized App Store? Like,
I
it's
think
like there's
so.
best practices for marketing too. It doesn't mean there's generally
Yeah.
accepted best practices for like global marketing. So, how far have those
Mm,
best practices gone to take into account localizability and localization opportunities? Or is that what you're trying to solve? Is that what you're doing here?
so so Um, to answer your first question, I think there's definitely overlap. For example, one kind of generally accepted fact about App Store optimization is that those images are among the most powerful components of the listing that you can possibly optimize, and not least, obviously, during this era when everybody has super short
Right.
attention spans. We might not even scroll down to read more about the product.
The age
We
of
just want to
TikTok.
see. Exactly, yeah. So
Yeah.
we might just scroll through the images, if even that, or perhaps just look at those first ones and read those short headlines, and that has to be enough to convince someone to download that app. Um, and obviously, if you just translate the description copy that's below those images, um, is not necessarily going to be that influential. And
Right.
obviously,
It's kind of
visual
like the bare minimum, right? It's
is
like,
kind of, yeah. And I'm of the opinion that if you have a global audience and you're really trying to communicate to somebody, speaking their language is kind of a given. Like that's like just about the starting point, and then we start talking about how you actually localize an experience. And of course, I think it should be said that there's a time and a place for different localization approaches, and sometimes it's a perfectly is the absolute right localization decision to just translate something so that you have information available. But when it comes,
hey,
um,
I'm of the mind sometimes it's absolutely the right decision not to localize something, right? Everything's
exactly,
contextual, so there's no right answer.
exactly, obviously, and in every organization would have their own priorities as well. Perhaps not every language isn't of equal priority to them. So obviously, I think it's good that we have these different methods in like our collective localization toolbox that we can then just pull out what we need, and where where it is right. So in the app stores, that was something that we definitely wanted to approach it as an experience, and kind of see how, I don't want to use the word manipulating, but maybe optimizing is the better word. How optimizing the different elements would impact the conversion rates in different markets. And the app stores are an interesting platform. Also, especially the Google Play Store might be a bit easier to access from different countries. If you want to look at what app store listings look like in Japan, for example, or Indonesia or Germany or wherever, you can get a sense of what what sort of design language is used, what kind of messaging local companies are using when they talk about their product, to kind of get a better sense of what is expected, and kind of what is what sort of communication is successful. And sometimes you may notice that actually this is something I need to completely rethink what I'm doing here,
Right.
and we need to completely rethink our designs, for example. But yeah,
It's a challenging balance, right? Because like what you're saying
yeah,
is like a good starting point is to go basically do a competitive analysis, right?
yeah,
And like what do we do? And and this is something we do at Nimdzi. Like we help clients with this, doing competitive analysis. They want to
yeah,
go in, they want to go global, and like, all right, let's. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but let's do what needs to be done to provide that intelligence.
yeah.
But what I always say is like the intelligence is it's a first step, right? Like
Mm,
it's a
mm,
prerequisite, but it needs to go further. Like where I've seen people really succeed, really get their bang for their research buck or their bang for their user experience research buck is the ones that go beyond just like, what do I need in order to operate in this
mm,
market? What do I need in order to talk to my customers? What do I need in order to understand what my customers are saying for me? And the ones that go on is, what do my customers expect? Not even what do my customers need. What do my customers expect? And oftentimes those expectations have been heavily, heavily influenced by the competitors that you didn't even know that you had in the local market, because they've kind of set the stone, they've kind of
mm.
built the market unless you have first mover advantage, right? So it's a good place to start with that research, but how do you then translate that into customer improved customer experience? I would say.
Mm. Yeah. And obviously there is the challenge of, for example, if you start feeling like actually our design language isn't anything like anywhere near what commonly kind of what's closer to the aesthetic kind of norms and expectations in a certain market. How do I still how do we still look like us? How do we maintain brand integrity? And I think this is where cross-functional localization comes in, which is kind of part of this approach that I pitched at the Lock World Innovation Challenge. That you need to bring people from different parts of the organization together to work on that localized experience, so that you can make sure that it's definitely thoroughly holistically localized, and not just, for example, translated, because localization, I think we're closing doors if we think it's just a linguistic operation. There's a lot more goes into that. So for example, at What3Words, when it comes to these app store listings, we have a cross-functional team working on those. We have product marketing, creative, localization, UX design, these types of people in our team kind of working together. And when you can bring, let's say, a designer, when a designer is already in that conversation, we don't really have to worry about, is this going to be, is this going too far? Is this going to, not be kind of on brand in a way? So
Yeah.
it's just really, using that data and research to figure out culturally better ways to express that same brand identity, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, but
Mm,
honestly, I'm thinking you said in the room with the designer, and that caught my attention because what I've found from talking to folks on the enterprise side is that's not always a given that you have a designer in the same room as the loc team or the globalization team or the
yeah.
international, whatever you call yourselves, right?
Mm.
And is that something that you had to, I don't want to say struggle, but is that something that you had to kind of like create this norm or this best practice of getting people in the same room? Did you have to push for that, or was it a natural evolution? How did that come about?
That's definitely a struggle I recognize as well. And I think, whenever you talk to, a localization manager, for example, there's that collective eye roll and sigh. I think everybody recognizes that challenge.
Yeah.
And I think in our case, it was, I can't stress enough the importance of being able to demonstrate um, the significance of localization, using metrics that actually really matter in that organization and that really make sense to, for example, a marketer or a product manager, because there's a very big difference in let's say just talking about, for example, cost per word, right? Which is a metric that we
Sure, let's
use
talk
a lot
about
in
that.
the in the industry. There's a big difference to going to that designer or marketing manager or what have you, and saying, this is the cost per word, if we do this or that. To if you go to them and say, we can reduce our cost per install
There you
in
go.
these
Now
digital
you caught
ads
my
by,
attention. Now you caught my attention.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
exactly,
like cost per
exactly.
word. What's
So
for the, what? What? We're paying per
that's the
words? Why are we
thing.
paying per words? What kind of words? What does that mean? So it's just, there's too many questions, right? There's just too many questions when you
Yeah.
start talking about CPW, right? Cost per word. And
Yeah, it's a metric that makes, a lot of sense on the localization side, but it's not particularly attractive, it's not particularly informative necessarily outside of kind of the localization industry. So I think it's really important, and that was, I would say, absolutely key for us as well, that we were able to kind of redefine successful localization and impactful localization, and start using metrics that really matter to, and importantly make sense to others in our organization. And that's why I think being able to collect data, and evolving and optimizing your localization based on that data is
and
quite important.
the right data, right? Which is to say the
Right data
data
as
that your
well.
stakeholders care about.
This is the thing. Like, obviously, you can walk up to your CEO, and say, hey, this is what another organization in a completely different situation does somewhere else. But when you're able to demonstrate that impact in that organization's own context, for example, in our case, in the App Store, we started with very simple copy experiments. And after a while, with that cumulative growth, when we were able to optimize the specific listing, to convert better, we were able to have an entirely different conversation and say, hey, when instead of this, we talk about what three words like this, to this specific audience in this language, we're able to see the conversion rate go up this much, and we were talking about really significant growth. So I think in that sense, speaking the same language as others in the organization is really, really important.
What is you're talking about significant growth. What is your biggest, and I'm not asking for company confidential anything, but like, what is your biggest like success that you can point to and be like, look, because we did this, because we customized and went beyond and above and beyond traditional translation, everything, because we customized this, this is the response that we got from a particular audience.
I would say, yeah, you're right. I can't share the
Yeah,
exact numbers, but what I can say is that, in these App Store experiments, is not uncommon at all to get an inconclusive result. Like what you did, the test you set up actually, it didn't make any difference. The needle didn't move at all.
well, I imagine the majority of them are going to be like that, but that's not what you're doing it
Yeah,
for. You're doing it for the outliers.
exactly. And but despite that, we've been able to see double-digit growth.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Can you tell
So
me
so
what
to kind of
language?
give you
Can you tell me what languages?
um
Okay, no, I won't put you on the spot. I won't put you on the
a
spot. All
couple,
right,
a couple, but
a
obviously,
couple.
yeah, a couple, yeah, but obviously are definitely more than just a few. So,
Yeah.
so obviously our listings are public, so anyone can go and have a look around.
All right, all right. Well, I should have done my homework before this. I pulled up the App Store. I pulled up the Spanish version of the app too, just because I was curious. And for those that are playing along at home, there's some different screenshots here. The description is different. So this is what three words is an easy way to identify precise locations. This one starts with the
You may
inner.
want to pull up the Japanese one
Oh, see,
if you
now we're
have
getting to
access to
it. Now
that
we're getting
one.
to it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get answers out of you yet. I'm assuming JP. Yes. No, I don't want to translate it. Actually, I should have translated it. I don't speak
No
Japanese. Do you?
problem. Okay, maybe you need to if you're able to hop on the Play Store site.
Okay.
So Google Play, what three words? That might have the most up-to-date stuff.
Google Play. Android, so uncivilized. I don't know how to. I don't know how to switch
It is
between countries on this. But
if you just search for what three words, it should
okay,
be.
what
Maybe
three
I'm able
words?
to
Okay, there we go.
find the link for
Bam!
you
I got
direct.
it. I got it.
So you'll only need to change the language in the end to
The language in the end. I don't see the language details. ID.
the last letters, isn't it there?
No, it's not. But
Can I send you a direct link?
send me a
What's the
link,
best
and
way
in the
to?
meantime, we'll try to fill the dead air here because the yeah, Japanese would be very very interesting to look at because typically that's the oh here we go. That was copy link address. All
Yeah,
right.
so to give an idea of,
Bam. Here we go.
here we go. Yeah, to give an idea of,
And sorry for
a
those that are
very,
listening as a podcast. We're looking at the Japanese on-screen text. We'll do our best to narrate the differences here. All right.
yeah.
Go, Mayu.
So yeah, very different visual experience already. So you see that we've definitely we started with these really small scale copy experiments, but that was kind of the proof of concept, and we were then able to get the designer in the same room and work with us.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, very different design. I see. I mean, the thing that stands out the most, other than just the language, is the bright yellow featured image here is a stark contrast to how it looks in English.
Mm.
When you're analyzing the success of these different things, like how do you do that? Do you do A/B testing? Do you look at okay, so it is basically there's an A/B testing component to it. What does that look like?
Yeah.
How many rounds do you do? And how do you during that A/B testing? Are you doing anything else to collect user feedback as well, or are you just looking at the data that you're collecting from the app stores?
Mainly the data, because that really is the user feedback.
Right,
What
exactly.
what is yeah. So what is influential? What is appealing to them? What makes sense to them? It's all kind of in the numbers. And as to the rounds of iteration, it really depends. Really depends on where we are with the conversion rate to begin with. Um, Depends on the priority of that particular language and market at the time. So lots of different things would affect that. And similarly, do we want to keep optimizing one specific component? For example, do we want to change something in that headline visual, for example, in that Japanese listing, or do we want to start experimenting in that longer description copy below it? So there are lots of options for what you can do, and how you can kind of decide what makes sense based on what you're seeing in your traffic and conversion rates.
Yeah, and I'm seeing this here, and the next question that comes to mind, are there any similarities between markets? So, for example,
Mm.
have you come across a situation where it's like, oh, the French market is responding very well to this asset, whatever it may be, right? This English, this copy, or this image, this copy. Maybe we should try that in the Spanish market or the Italian market or the bordering. You know what I'm saying? Like, is there any grouping together, or is every market treated individually? And I suppose the question would somewhat hinge upon like, what is your data set? Like, how many downloads, how many users? Because the bigger your data set, the bigger your problems as far as analyzing that data, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely benefits to kind of sharing those learnings across languages and even projects. Really, obviously, the App Store is only one of the things that we try and optimize, and where we kind of tailor the localized experience. So, for example, we have a similar cross-functional team working on our digital ads. So, for example, Google Ads, Facebook Ads, and yeah, we do definitely exchange exchange learnings between the different cross-functional groups, and also about different languages. So, if something has worked particularly well in a certain country in a certain language, why not give it a go if there isn't a
Right.
reason not to
Yeah.
in another
Give it a
market,
shot.
and then
Hey,
see what
you
happens.
might find something that would do better in the English in the source, right? I'm assuming the
This
source
is
is
the
English,
thing.
right?
Yeah, this is the thing that I think, if you're translating, you're essentially replicating or copying something
Yeah.
into another
There
language.
was
And of
a
course, if you
healthy debate in the comments section about that. But I understand.
yeah,
Yes.
obviously, yeah, and obviously, if you localize and especially if you transcreate, it can become
Yeah.
something entirely different.
No,
So
but I
that's
get it. Like essentially, we are converting words at
yeah,
the most
and
base
I
level.
think yeah, and kind of this impact localization approach that we um as we come to call it, the key difference to, for example, transcreation, which, in some contexts, in some organizations, that already includes, for example, design localization. But the difference here is that, you know, localization doesn't have to be kind of, one and done, tick a box and then not think about it again. It can be something that you keep optimizing and developing in this kind of data-led interaction with the audience that you're localizing the experience for. So that's kind of the key difference there, and kind of, learn as you go
So,
what it is about your brand and your product that resonates.
so that's important. I want to stay here just for a second because I think that's important. You just basically answered one of my questions, which is, so what's the difference between impact localization, as we're calling this, and transgression? And what I'm
Mm.
understanding from your response is impact localization doesn't stop when import into the CMS. Like it doesn't just stop there. You're continually looking at the results that your localization has, just as you would look at the result that your English assets and your English copy are getting. And
Yeah,
that's the main difference. Whereas,
that is the main difference.
yeah, sounds expensive. It sounds like it's tough question time, right? Is it worth it?
Yeah,
Like, what's the ROI
it
on
is.
this?
That's the thing. Like, um, I think there's a very strong focus in the localization industry on, automation and kind of making the process as light as possible. And that's, I
Efficiency.
think,
Yeah.
efficiency. And I think it's in many ways it's perfectly justified. And it's very true that, the more you start kind of tailoring your approach and tailoring the content for different languages, the more difficult it becomes to do that at scale. And obviously, more work is always more work. That's obvious. But I think it is. Is it expensive if you don't do that? Like, what's the price of that? What's the price of, translating or transcreating and leaving it at that?
Right. The opportunity
Um,
cost, right?
this
Like,
is the thing.
what's the
So
price of
so
letting a first mover move into those or a competitor or whatever it may be move into those markets before you, right?
hmm.
That's
I think there's UX design is one field that I like to, draw a parallel here, because they, that's and where I think localization as an industry, we could learn a lot from them, or from UX design,
agree,
because that's,
agree. Yeah.
it's all about, you're right, it's so
And
user
they could learn
centered.
something from us too, right? I'm not just saying like, oh, we're subservient to them. Mm-mm, mm-mm. But I believe the future of both of our industries is intertwined with
Yeah,
the UX and the design guys and the global localization.
yeah.
If I were prone to making bold statements, I would say 20 years from now, that's all going to be the same thing. It's just going to be globalized UX
Mm,
design, right? But
yeah,
I'm not so
yeah.
ambitious as to make such
So you
claims.
wouldn't say something
But
like
20
that.
years from now, if I'm right, I will pull up this recording and show it to people.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad I was here. Um, yeah, I think, as I was saying, it's so user centered, and it's iterative, and it's all about empathy and kind of, you know forgetting all, bias and really just focusing on the user. Um, and yeah, I think there's just, a lot there, and kind of, working in smaller chunks, iterating as you go, and always, measuring how something is, how something has performed that you've designed. So I think it's it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
I'd say so.
And that's kind of my thinking as well. Like, what if localization was more like that? What if it wasn't, just that box we tick that we preferably automatically ticked, and for as cheap as possible. And you don't see that happening to UX design. Nobody's trying to, we're not trying to like automate that in that sense. Um,
Yeah, we see we have a comment here from William Dan. Hi, William. And I always thought localization is part of UX. Ooh, fighting words, fighting words. No, UX is part of localization. William Dan. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean there are organizations, and some organizations do
yeah,
this better than others, right? Some
very
organizations it's
true.
very well defined, just like any organization. Let's stop talking about UX for a second. Talk about marketing departments. Let's talk about SEO, right? All of these departments within organizations, which are typically considered either like stakeholders or internal clients for the localization department. Some organization they're super synced up, and it's like I've worked with companies going into dozens and dozens and dozens of languages, where it's like, no, step one, we're going to localize keywords because we're working with the SEO guys. And so this is a situation where it's like, no, the SEO team isn't just like our stakeholder, our client. We're not just delivering, like, no, we're partnering with them. Most companies aren't quite there yet. And if they are there,
Mm.
then no one's 100% there yet because as we get there, I feel that as an industry we've spent years and years and years trying to embed ourselves with our stakeholders internally, like
Mm.
get embedded with the marketing department, right? So
Mm.
you look at a company like HubSpot. We have a lessons in localization on HubSpot, and they're just like part of the global marketing. It's just all one. It's like the localization team doesn't even think of themselves really as a localization team. They're just an extension of the global marketing team, and that's
Yeah.
taken work to get there. But that's just marketing. So it's like, and if we use
Mm.
that as like a metaphor for the industry, is like we've done all this work to get the success, and we have succeeded. We have succeeded. But it's like, oh, there's this new thing popping up, right? This new
Mm.
focus on, it's not new. I'm going to piss off people if I say it's new, but an increased focus on customer intimacy, on customer delight, on user experience. Essentially, I'm trying not to use the
Yeah.
word UX.
Yeah. I wonder if there's, I sometimes think if there's a bit of an accessibility issue with localization, because, you know, it's not that, people don't know that sometimes you have to and really should be localizing your designs, for example, that, the visual experience just needs to look different somewhere else to come across in the way that you intend. Um, and to localize your value propositions, for example. It's not that we don't know, but I wonder if there is this some kind of perceived accessibility, some perceived barrier that if you go, for example, on the website of some a multinational giant, let's say Nike or one of those guys, and obviously you know they have marketing teams likely in so many different countries, and very very different level of resources to most other companies. They are much smaller. So I'm wondering, if you go, for example, on Nike's website and look at the different versions that they've created for different markets, you can't just screenshot that and go to your marketing team like, look at
You're
what these guys are
you're
doing. Like,
talking
this is
to a
what we should
guy
be doing.
who has actually in his life spent time going through Nike's different international websites. So I don't, and you couldn't have known that when you used that as an example. But yeah, I was surprised by what I saw, and I'm in the loop on what Nike's doing to a certain extent, right? And I love talking about Nike because them. I like talking about Nike. It always comes back to Nike and Disney for some reason. I love talking
It
about
does.
Nike and Disney because
It does.
they're the ones
Yeah.
that get themselves into hot water sometimes intentionally, sometimes
Mm,
not intentionally, like with,
yeah.
international markets, looking at you, China. Um, but they're the ones who seem to really care about their end customers. And using Nike as an example, they made the really turning out to be a good decision. But I don't even remember when it was, 5, 10 years ago, to go direct to consumer and pull out
Mm,
of the retail model and go direct to consumer and go online. So they're selling directly to their people on Nike.com, and they're doing it around the world. And a lot of their revenue and these are public figures, is coming from their international markets, and they take that very seriously. But even a company like Nike, you go to their websites and you'll see differences. And this kind of informed the question I asked you earlier, but a lot of them are regional differences. So they'll have like
mm,
one kind of template website, and this was years ago, by the way, one template website for Western Europe and one template website for Asia Pacific countries, right? And then they'll kind of localize from there. But a big part is localizing the style too, and the customs, what people wear. And I'm sorry, I totally derailed this conversation talking about Nike website localization. I just wanted to show off the fact that I did that, I guess. But yeah, it made me question, like when I was looking at this, what is the method behind this? What is the logic
mm,
behind this? And I'm not sure that companies always have a logic behind their localization decisions. I think it's
mm,
getting better, but there was a time not that long ago when I think EOL discussions like extensive localization, how many languages to go into, which markets to prioritize, tier one, tier two, tier three, setting all of these. Those decisions were not made in a mature way. They were just like, oh, Microsoft's localizing into these languages, so we'll do it too, right?
mm,
Or these are, everybody knows these are the top 20 languages. Or they'll look at, we have reports on like online the online consumer consumption index broken down by market, based on purchasing power, internet, blah blah, all of these different things. But that might have worked 10 years ago. But what I'm
mm,
seeing these days is companies really need information, data, and feedback from their users that's specific to them. So, whereas, and I feel this acutely because I work for an organization that does research. Like we do this, we get paid to research. And 10 years ago, you could write one report on App Store optimization and sell it to 20 different companies. And they're, oh, this is great. I love it. Right? These days, they'd be like, oh, yeah, that's cute. That's nice. But what I need is specifically user information on mine. Just because these are the top
mm,
10 company or top 10 languages in my vertical doesn't mean those are the top 10 languages for my specific customer base. Everything's customized these days.
mm,
Anyways,
mm.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I have to. I know I'm the one who got us talk about Nike, and now I'm the one
Oh,
like making us stick to that topic. But I think um the obviously these who knows why these companies do what they do and how they do it. But I wonder um there's definitely a difference between a company our size. We've got about 120 employees. Nike's a little bit bigger. So if I just screenshot, and I trust me, I have screenshot it, Nike's website, and just to demonstrate, this is localization. Like, look at this, guys. Let's
right.
do something like this. Is that something that I wonder if there's a bit of a barrier. Like, this is something that, yes, Nike is able to do, but it's inaccessible to us because we don't have the same resources. Um, I sometimes, because it can't be that people don't know that ideally we would be um putting, like, investing a bit more in localization and kind of going beyond just pure linguistics.
So to me, it would seem like it certainly helps having in-country presence, right?
Yeah.
And a global behemoth like Nike or anybody like Reebok, anybody,
Mm,
Apple, Google, anybody. a global behemoth will have a local presence in many
Mm,
countries, many markets around the world. And traditionally, typically, those are, growth focused presence, like sales and marketing, essentially,
mm,
that are boots on the ground in these different organizations. So that helps. But I would say the biggest way that that helps is simply having the connection to your users. Like having the
mm,
people in country in and of itself isn't what's helping. What's helping is having advocates for the users, because that's what those sales and marketing, those subsidiary people, the in-country, in-market folks end up being. They become advocates for their local users, and they're able to go back to the mothership. If it's Nike, we're talking Beaverton. If it's Microsoft, we're talking Redmond, and say, look, here's what our local users are demanding. And the mothership can either agree to listen to them, or
mm.
they can agree not to listen to them. If you say, companies, not all companies have that level of resources, though. I would challenge that by saying, if user experience, global, no, if user experience, because global user experience is user experience, if user experience is important to you, then there are ways to do it. You don't need in-country
Yeah.
people. Like the language industry is built on an outsourced supply chain model. Like the whole industry is built around that. So if you don't
Mm.
have the resources or the expertise or the capabilities or the knowledge in house, then outsource. Talk to your translation vendor. Hell, talk to Nimdzi. We do this work all the time. That's my plug. That's
Exactly.
my
Yeah.
hidden sales plug for this.
Yeah, and I think, what was really important for us was to realize that, we are a much smaller company than for example Nike and many of these other global enterprises. But we still have that expertise in house,
Right.
and we're able to kind of leverage these processes that already exist at What Three Words, and just kind of make them about localization. So for this iterative development idea that all product teams are already so familiar with. Um, Value proposition design from product marketing, and all of these processes that already exist. So I think it might be, you know whoever is listening, I think it would be, especially if you are in small in a small to mid-sized company, kind of invite to think what resources you actually have, because this is why I say I wonder if it's a perceived barrier or a perceived accessibility issue. We think we can't do that because the
Yeah.
examples that we see out there are by these companies with very different level of resources. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I think, it's like when I first started doing these live streamings, I was calling them "You Can," right? It's like "You Can," and then I'd have a subject line, and I feel this is appropriate here. It's like you can. There's a way. And if there's one thing that I've
Mm,
learned working in this industry is there's a way. There's a way
mm,
to do it. It might not always be a cost-effective way, right? But
mm,
there's always a way. And if there's tons of folks in the industry, tons of companies, agencies out there willing to help with this, and this is a hot topic right now. User experience is
mm,
it's the future. I dare say, God, I keep saying that I'm not a futurist, but I do make a lot of bold claims. I really believe this is the direction our industry is heading. And I've talked to you, I've talked to a number of people, both on and offline, about, how do we measure that? What do we mean? Because when we talk about
mm,
user experience, we have the same challenges when we talk about the ever elusive language quality, which is, what
mm,
is language quality? What is good language quality?
mm,
What is user
yeah.
experience? What is good user experience? Right?
Mm,
And fortunately, for a company like yours with just thousands and thousands of downloads from the App Store, you get that data. Like you kind of get that
mm,
real time feedback without having to do expensive focus groups and surveys and all of that stuff.
mm.
But not everybody has that. And it's an exciting time to be part of this industry right now because we get to kind of figure it out together as an industry.
Very true. Very true.
And I think on that note,
Absolutely.
I will thank you for your contribution to the conversation because it takes people like you signing up for the Process Innovation Challenge to help bring awareness to this.
My pleasure entirely. The Process Innovation Challenge was a lot of fun, and it's in case anyone listening or watching this later saw that, I'd absolutely love to hear what people think about this kind of more iterative localization approach. And it's by no means this is the final truth about things. So very open to suggestions and ideas for improvement. How it could be made even more helpful for others out there.
Yeah, so for those of you listening out there, listening, watching along at home, I will encourage you connect with Maiju. And here I pulled up her LinkedIn profile here so that you can find her. Maiju Nurminen. Thank you once again for coming on, and thank you to Yuka Nakasone for making this happen. You were our fairy godmother. I'm not sure if you're watching right now, but when you do, if you do, then thank you big time. Keep sending them my ways. As far as the future, what's happening with Nimdzi Live right now, I am not going live as much as I used to, which is you're welcome. You're welcome. I know a lot of you guys are sick of me, but what we're doing here at Nimdzi is we're kind of taking a step back to see what's going on with this live streaming thing, taking feedback from you guys, because we're essentially building something new here. Our industry isn't huge on live streaming yet, and I'm doing what I can to change that. So feedback. Please, do you like these pop-up live streams? Would you like to see some more structure? Would you like to see different guests, different format? You tell me. I'm very, very interested in getting your feedback. And quick reminder, Nimdzi Insights is a market research and localization company. We do research, a lot of research like what we're talking about today, helping people better understand their in-country users and improve the results in local markets around the world. If you're a company that is global and wants to have more meaningful conversations with your international users, or if you're not global and want to start building your international user base, then give us a call. We want to talk to you. So, Maiju, any last chance, 10 seconds, closing thoughts?
Oh gosh. Well, I think just go have a play with the What Three Words app. Tell me what you think about the iterative localization method. Let's connect on LinkedIn and continue the conversation. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Tucker. This has been fun.
Yes, ma'am. All right, guys. We will see you next time. Cheers.